Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming, and today a special look at Chrono Odyssey. That's the very hyped and hopeful big MMO, our first sort of major MMO release in quite some time. Now I get to tell you that I've played it, and not only that, we're looking at my footage today and we'll be discussing that experience. Myself, Josh and Cotton took part in a short 2-day playtest ahead of the beta that's coming that had some basic restrictions on it, like your max level potential was 20, set in a limited play area compared to say the full planned game, which, you know, was still massive. We ended at roughly level 16, having completed most of what was available after playing for the 2 days. Today then, I'm going to give you my first impressions of that, and if I think it's something to be excited for. And spoiler, I definitely think it's good. We'll start with a light intro to the story and setting for this MMORPG. It's kind of an intense start. You're dropped into a nightmare situation where everything's a bit overwhelming and it's doomsday. Alien-like monsters are everywhere, you're ultimately being crushed actively, only for all of this to be paused mid-destruction and you get sent to the past. The setting itself is classic fantasy RPG, but it's being twisted and invaded by this void invasion. So while you're wandering around, say, a beautiful field, passing through a village, exploring a cave or whatever it is, you might just bump into this otherworldly sight. A floating structure that dominates the space, terraforming the ground under it, from a completely different universe, at least in feel. These are the Chrono Gates, which stand very starkly on the map when you have a look at it. Armed with the Chronotector, the device that helps you kind of escape the doomsday, you need to find these gates and reactivate its full powers. To do that, we need to be strong enough to face the void monsters inside, but also the ones that have begun to leak out into this otherwise normal fantasy land. So I think this setting is really cool. You got classic fantasy mixed with this otherworldly threat. It lets them do some of the more classic stuff, but then go crazy with different designs and themes and setups, both in the story but also your direct gameplay. Let's start with the topic of combat now though, because I think it's very important for a MMO that's also claiming to be an action RPG. It definitely is. You're in a 3D environment. If I swing my sword, it has to physically hit the enemy. So there is obviously spacing, avoiding enemy attack by being far away enough from them, but also of course the classics of blocking attack, rolling an attack, iframing it, countering it, and all that stuff. In this test, we had 3 main classes of play. We had the Swordsman, the one I was playing, and then we had Cotton playing the Berserker, and Josh on the Ranger. Each class has 3 main weapons to choose from, but you'll have 2 weapons equipped at once, and the idea is that you're going to swap between them. So as I use my dual blades, I've got 4 abilities possible, and then as I swap to my greatsword, I've got 4 greatsword specific abilities available when I'm holding the greatsword. There's also perks for swapping between them, passives that might benefit you, like increased rage or defenses as I swap between them, but also special attacks as I combo into a different weapon. Each weapon fundamentally is different, but can be set up in different ways based on the passive progression. So they all have their own skill tree, right? But you can go around that skill tree in some interesting ways. There's a left side, middle side, and right side. In the middle was mostly passives, and then the left and right we had sort of 2 main focuses. So I could go into AoE playstyle with a greatsword, or I could go into single target like stunning stuff. With the dual blades, I could lean into countering and parrying, or go into AoE whirlwind and grouping enemies. So what I chose to do as the swordsman with the rage resource builder is I went into the greatsword as my builder setup to generate rage, and then I had my dual blades as my spender setup. Further than that, I had it set up so my greatsword had hard CC and great big single hits from that, as well as gap closing and mobility. So I was leaping and slamming, charging and shoulder tackling, using iframes and hard CC to build up stagger on my enemies. Whereas the dual blade setup I went for was all about a little bit of countering, but mostly about having the rage to spend it all on dual blades and doing AoE spins, fantastic for world clear and specific parts of boss fights. The sword and shield, the third option that I have with this class, was much more about generating aggro, holding it and taking hits. More of a tanky playstyle. Each class also has its unique passives that we seem to unlock at level 10, 15 and 20. The first one at 10 was basic passives, where it's like percent increases to damage or survivability perks, but the one at level 15 was more of an active button that I got to choose from 3 different options and slot it into its own section. where there were 4 places for that. So I imagine there's more that I'm going to get in high levels. Basically like giving me big defenses, generating a ton of rage, or giving me a good DPS window. This was reflected then in the other classes. So Josh with his ranger, he had a bow, dual crossbows, and a rapier, all with their own very different playstyles. But you know, you can set these up for different focuses. I think that was quite a lot of variety in feel and function per class, per weapons, that we were all doing very different things with our own purposes. So I think this is fantastic design and was very intuitive and nice to pick up and use pretty much immediately. On the other end, you have your enemies and bosses and fights and stuff. How does it work in this game? Well, unlike other even action MMORPGs I've played, there aren't really a lot of telegraphs that are like a red box or a red circle or that kind of thing to really tell you what's coming. It's just the visuals of the attack, very Soulsy in feel. It's up to you to space these things out physically, or iframe roll them, block them, counter them like I said. I found that in the open world, the boss fights, you know, they have like lots of mechanics to deal with, likely considering the nature of this MMO, and when there's lots of players rather than a small test like I was in, there'll be a lot of people attacking it. Versus in the solo instance versions or special boss fights, the mechanics were way more involved, like a proper boss fight you're fighting in a normal RPG. To give you a couple of examples of this, one of the main bosses that I fought in one of the Chrono Gates basically had me enter it, and I'm looking at this long corridor. There's fire traps and timings on that, and as I progress down the corridor, I see there's the boss at the end. It's firing projectiles at me, laser blasts, and I have to physically avoid them by hiding in like little corners or iframe rolling them while dodging the fire. As I get to the end, I've got to pull these 2 levers while dodging the slams of the boss. It's actually a very weak boss, so I'm able to destroy it very quick. I've got to go back down the corridor to avoid the poison, wait for that to end, get back to the boss and finish it off. Pretty unique experience. Completely different to this next one, the Capra here, that has phases where it leaves the fight and comes back in. Every time it would come back in, it would do this big blood wave sort of explosion that I just spaced out. And every time it would leave, it would spawn a massive pile of ads. So I'd need a good setup with one of my weapons for dealing with big packs of enemies. In my case with dual blades, lots of AoE spins, right? But then easy counters because there's so many attacking me, it's a freebie, and a big cleave from that. Then going to my greatsword and going for the more horizontal swings to hit many of them at once. As the fight progressed, more and more mechanics came in from the boss as it was doing longer combos and more aggressively sticking to me. And then at the end, it sent that wave of ads and was fighting me at the same time, which was very much nearly overwhelming. But it was very satisfying to overcome these things based on the skill check that they were. On that note, I should mention the whole chrono power aspect, using that Chronotector item from the story. It's a thing that lets you travel through the time, but it also gives you crazy powers in game, and you slowly unlock them and then progress them with their own kind of upgrading skill trees. So you start with one that you press and it reveals stuff around you. In some cases that would reveal footsteps that we'd follow to an objective and that kind of thing. But the other 4 were more direct for combat. So one of them is the ability to summon an ally in, based on those special bosses that you've actually hunted like I mentioned. So the first one you get is a basic summon that helps you in a fight, not ultra strong but reasonable. But say that corridor boss I explained, you actually get that. And it's amazing for building up stagger against targets, because they have this bar under the health bar. Once you do enough stagger damage, they get a stun and that's free damage for a bit. So that summon would just sort of do these big seismic slams and generate a lot of stagger. The next one, the Capra in fact, was just insane for DPS. So they'd serve different purposes, you'd unlock them and then upgrade them. But then there was a time stop mechanic, which was fun for the mount quest, where you have to pause time on a horse so you can actually sneak up and get to it. And there was also the rewind, and there was also a kind of resistance one that would give you a lot of protection while the buff's active. So you can upgrade any of these to, reduce the cooldown, make them last longer, give them enhanced properties. But the really nice detail about it is that it just felt really easy to use these. I held tab and I could look at my options and then swap between them and just press C to send them out. Whenever I used any of them, they all felt incredibly impactful on the fight and took a hard boss fight to something that seems like it's going to take a while and it's going to be a real skill check into something quite much more manageable. So if you're struggling with anything, save your Chrono Powers and use it for that. So that's a lot of stuff around combat and that type of thing. Let's talk about different types of content that's in the game. So you have your main quests and side quests, right? Usual NPCs that are going to offer you quests and you go out and do them. But there's also these area pop-up versions of them. So as you encounter like a cultist ritual, it'll just pop a quest up and go, hey, interrupt that, you'll get some rewards and XP. So whenever you'd bump into them, they'd be incredibly worth it to tackle and deal with. Some of them were proper boss fights that we did when we were very much underleveled, and it took quite a while to defeat, but the satisfaction of beating something because you can overcome its mechanics with iframes and eventually deal enough damage, very fun. But then there were all other kinds of content, like these insane labyrinths. You might hear this weird structural sound of otherworldly echoes, and you'll find a gate to a labyrinth, which is essentially a puzzle maze that you have to overcome with a boss fight at the end. So in lots of cases, this was doing like parkour, jumping over lasers, crawling under them, running across a path that's falling as you go, so you're on a time limit, pressing a button that reveals the safe path, and then having to actually remember that as you do it. These were really fun. There was a mix of solo dungeons and sort of group mini dungeons. So solo dungeons you have to do on your own, where there were kind of mini dungeons that you could do in a group, finding 4 special locations where enemies spawn in, cleansing those, dealing with those, and then facing the final challenge at the end. Much more unique were things like the trial system, which is like this gauntlet of random challenges. So in one, I'm in a maze and there's symbols and I have to find the right levers and get the correct symbol to open the door. In one, there is a bunch of goats and one of them is a boss that I need to expose and fight, properly fight, if I want to progress. In one of them, I felt like I was in Dark Souls 1 and Sen's Fortress with swinging blades that I've got to time jumps to get past. In the one that I failed, it was this big arena with me in this boss fight and a kind of lava pool that would fill up. I'd need to jump onto the side, run around and find the correct glowing lever, but the boss would be on me at the same time. So I need to run to the other side of the circle, so it's over there, then run back and then press the lever in time and then get back to the fight. From hearing Josh doing his at the same time, he was having a completely different experience in every single trial. So it was a super cool, random feeling thing. Super different to the rest of the gameplay. Another example of that would be the bounty system. So as you get to the first town, you got to find a bounty board. There were like 5 tabs of 3 different targets, and obviously progressing challenge, but progressing rewards. By doing these bounties, you'd actually get unique resources that could give you life skill related higher end materials, perfect for crafting, saving us a lot of time, but also tons of XP and our main source of gold, in fact. So you pick up a bounty, go do some questing in an area, make sure you go hunt down that target, which was essentially a unique mini boss that you need to cut the head off and bring back as proof at the end before picking up the next bounty and going after that. This was one of the most fun systems in the game by far because each bounty was a little bit different. For example, there was one of them where I had to climb down the side of a cliff and then hide behind boxes before the guy would ever show up. So reading comprehension is definitely going to be important for this. Information and context about your target and what you're going to need to do or what you're looking for will certainly help. In fact, that was the case with different quests. There was one where we were looking for a special chest, right? But it was just locked. There was a note next to it that talked about the enemies in the area having had one half of the key kind of thing, and the other, you're going to have to fish for it. If we didn't have reading comprehension, we never would have known that and struggled to find the key to the chest, obviously. So I think it could be a funny thing when people just don't read what's told to them and they have issues with this kind of stuff. But I like that they're doing it because it just feels a lot more varied. And, you know, you do the next thing, you go, okay, what's the thing here? What have I got to work out? Most of the time, it was simple, a boss fight, which is enjoyable in itself. But it was nice that they were doing some unique things with it. Other smaller stuff exists then. There were things like the tower climbs, these strange structures you'd activate, do a little jumping puzzle to climb to the top, get a chest. There were open world bosses you'd encounter, as I was mentioning, some of which were incredibly challenging. And then you got other stuff like your more classic MMO details, life skills, crafting, and gear progression. So everything was based on this kind of eye level system where it'd be like, hey, sometimes you go to a solo dungeon and it'd be like, you want this level of power and you're currently at this, maybe get some better gear. But in many cases, we were able to overcome all challenges irrelevant. Ultimately, it depends on whether you've got enough healing and, you know, how much can you dodge attacks and so on. The life skills might be familiar though. You've got kind of like 6 slots for different stuff. So there was a pickaxe, a hatchet for cutting down trees, there was a sickle for gathering herbs, a knife for doing skinning, a campfire, fishing rod. These had their own levels, and then you had your own skill levels in those life skills. Through a combination of having higher quality tools and obviously higher level life skills, you'd be faster at dealing with these things, able to gather things sooner. But what was nice and quite unique about this is if I found like a redwood tree, which is like a higher level thing in the context of this test, I could chop that tree down immediately. It would just take absolutely ages. So as you progress your life skills and tools, you cut down in the time that it takes to do stuff, but it's nice that you could find something really rare or good, and you could actually gather it immediately instead of having a pop-up that says, yeah, sorry bro, your mining's not 400. The life skills themselves would fuel everything. Crafting your gear was one of the key sort of progressions that we saw. Of course, killing enemies, opening chests, progressing stuff, playing the game, you get drops and gear. But if you want specific gear, then crafting it was worth it. But not just that, it was heavily encouraged. The gear that I would craft, even the weapons compared to the ones that I would find, were just straight up better. So gear crafting was heavily encouraged, so life skills were heavily encouraged. You get XP by doing life skills as well, so you will level a bit from it, which is a nice double up. When it came to crafting gear and weapons and such, it was interesting. There was like 6 or 7 different kinds of armor that everyone can wear, but obviously they have their own benefits. So if you're going to be tanking, you want to go for more of the metal armor, like proper armor, to get proper damage reduction. But if you looked at the stats and details of some of this gear, you might get specific benefits like different damage bonuses and so on. Also, they all look different, so you could craft what you want for fashion purposes. But it was often, say, something like, go get 2 of this specific ingot, 2 of this specific wood. To do that, I'd just go out into the world and find that ore, then I would process it into an ingot, same thing for the lumber, and they were all in logical places. Like if I wanted to find iron, it was all on the hills next to the starting village. But if I wanted to find titanium, I'd have to go up into like bigger mountainous areas towards the edge of the play area. When it came to things like, cooking, and alchemy, this was incredibly impactful. Before doing a big adventure, I'd just go outside the village, grab some herbs, grab some berries, maybe some other fruit, turn them all into a load of health potions. And then I would just chug them aggressively while learning the game. There were all kinds of potions that I would find and occasionally craft that would give me damage boosts, CDR, damage reduction, or other special effects that really help with the world bosses. On that note, with food and cooking, you can find food and there's lots of quest rewards for it, but obviously cooking your own is a reliable source. By having food active, you get that regen while you're out of combat, so that was amazing. And all kinds of buffs. And we could stack up the food buffs by eating a load of stuff and basically becoming roided out of our minds and taking on some of the harder challenges because of it. I wonder whether that will stay. Let's mention the map and general exploration as well, by the way. So like I said, it was a limited playtest, so we could only go so far. If you hit a barrier, it would literally be this magical barrier you couldn't go past. But the area of play was absolutely massive. You'd reveal the areas by finding these special beacon things, and then it would reveal that area on the map. Everything within that area was shockingly free. Like you could run up to a wall and climb up it, vault up it, double jump up it. You could get to some seriously high places, which was awesome. There were fast travel points at these special locations, allowing you to go these great distance instantly with no cooldown as long as you go from one waystone to another. There was also the inn in the starting village that would give you a teleport to it. I believe it was on a 10 or 15 minute cooldown, and we'd use that constantly. If you're running around on the ground, you'd just be running around at a sort of reasonable pace, but you could sprint and use your stamina. There's also mounts, the horses that you could unlock. As a heads up, we were able to buy mounts whenever we wanted for 100,000 gold, which we earned around the time that you also just basically get a quest that gives you a mount. Kind of in the center of the play area, there was an NPC that needed us to go help with a horse that got away. We used our special time stop power to actually reach the horse and get it, and then she just gave us a mount in response. So you do get one, and it's pretty awesome. It's like triple the normal running speed. You can also swim. And there's all kinds of hidden stuff, like the beacons you'd need to find to get the resources to upgrade your Chrono Powers. There were tons of small boxes in every area of questing, as well as hidden chests that might also give you gear you might use. So there's actually quite a lot of value to climbing around and exploring everything. But yeah, that's kind of all the stuff I wanted to highlight in this first impressions talk. I could play this game for 2 days, and I played the hell out of it for 2 days. What I can tell you for certain is there's something here that scratches that itch that I haven't been able to with an MMO in a long time. It has unique combat that feels very challenging but fair. It's got a unique power system with the Chrono Powers around a really cool combat system that is the 3 weapons and the way you swap between them, and then the many different playstyles that are within the skill tree, which by the way in this playtest we're able to put points into and then take them out to make changes whenever we wanted. I don't know whether that will be the case in the beta or the full game, but it meant it was very free to just try a lot of stuff. The solo challenges were some of the best stuff in the game, whether that was the trial that I was doing with all the crazy challenges it threw at me, The bosses from the main story, which were incredible mechanically, very challenging, but had that satisfaction of beating. And then you got like the world that's massive, rewards exploration, doesn't really limit you. You can climb and clamber up everything. You want to do that to get an idea of where the resources are. You got the classic life skill system that's familiar in any MMO, but hey, actually rewarded. Like I said, the crafting gear was always better than the dropped gear. Everything we got from a quest, or killed a boss, or found in a special chest, we could craft something that seemed a bit stronger or a bit better for our specific needs, or literally higher stats. And I've always found that a frustrating thing in a game like this, where you've got this crafting system and you spend all this time making it, and then it's not even as good as a random drop. I much prefer this. It was a test though. There were lots of bugs that I experienced, lots of lighting issues, things that were just rough around the edges. When it came to world bosses and the mechanics, and especially their telegraphs, so understanding their attacks, that was pretty hard and pretty punishing, because often it felt like I got hit by something I didn't see coming. Where I never felt that feeling when I was in a solo or group instance where things were a lot more, stable. A lot of that could be swept under the rug by the fact that this game is nowhere near release, but I will say nothing I experienced put me off. It just needs more time. So overall, I am very hopeful for Chrono Odyssey, and I genuinely enjoyed it more than I thought I would. So I hope this general first impressions and talk let you know what you wanted to know. We'll be covering more of the game and more information about it based on this experience and obviously the beta as it happens in the coming days. Until then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.